when the great Ottoman Empire spread across 3 continents. Its shadow reached deep into lands once ruled by the cross. Monasteries that had stood for centuries, silent, sacred homes for Christian nuns, soon found themselves surrounded by soldiers wearing the crescent emblem. At first, the invaders promised peace. They allowed the churches to stand, demanded only taxes, and spoke of tolerance. But behind the words of diplomacy, another truth brewed, one that would be whispered only in frightened prayers and hidden letters smuggled through the night. In the year 1462, as the empire tightened its control over the Balkans, a small convent stood atop a hill in what is now northern Greece. The nuns there lived quiet lives, devoting every sunrise to prayer and every evening to the poor. Among them was Sister Theodora, known for her kindness and courage. When Ottoman soldiers arrived, they demanded the keys to the chapel and the gold crucifix on the altar. Sister Theodora refused. "This belongs to God," she said, her voice trembling but firm. The commander, enraged, ordered the soldiers to seize everything. The sound of iron boots and shattered glass echoed to the halls as sacred icons were ripped from the walls and burned. The nuns were forced to choose, convert to Islam, abandon their vows, or face punishment. Some were taken as servants. Others disappeared, their names lost to history. The Ottoman court would later call it re-education. The church would call it martyrdom. Rumors spread across the region. Hidden chronicles from Venetian merchants spoke of nuns who secretly practiced their faith underground, gathering at night in catacombs lit by oil lamps. In the silence, they whispered ancient hymns while listening for footsteps above. Those who were caught were never seen again. Yet the empire could not extinguish faith. The more they suppressed the Christians, the stronger the stories grew. Pilgrims claimed that at midnight, the ruined convents glowed faintly. Some said it was a reflection of torches. Others swore it was the spirits of fallen nuns watching over their sacred ground. Centuries later, when archaeologists began to excavate the ruins of those monasteries, they found fragments of crosses hidden inside the walls and faint carvings of names, the last prayers of women who refused to be erased. One inscription, found beneath the cracked floor of a chapel, read, "Light cannot be taken by force." No Ottoman record mentions the fate of those nuns. The empire's archives remain silent, the pages missing. But the people who live near those ruins still tell the story, of voices that sing when the wind passes through the stones, and a faith that no empire could truly conquer. As centuries passed, the empire's glory began to fade, but the shadows of what happened in those monasteries never truly vanished. Local shepherds, who wandered through the abandoned hills, spoke of hearing faint bells ringing at dawn, though no church had stood there for generations. Travelers who dared to sleep near the ruins often claimed they saw a dim light flickering within the broken chapel, moving as if guided by unseen hands. Historians dismiss the stories as superstition. Yet one Ottoman journal, discovered in a private collection in Istanbul, mentioned an incident so carefully worded that many believe it was written to conceal a far darker truth. It spoke of a rebellious house of women who defied the Sultan's will and of a purification ordered by divine authority. The pages that followed were torn out, as if someone long ago had tried to erase what came next. Still, the memory of those women refused to die. By the 17th century, pilgrims secretly began to visit the ruins, leaving small tokens, a rosary, a piece of cloth, a candle, in memory of the vanished sisters. They called the place the Hill of Silent Prayers. In 1821, during the Greek War of Independence, rebels used the same site as a secret refuge. They discovered beneath the stones an underground chamber sealed with lime and brick. Inside were remains, dozens of them, wrapped in what looked like fragments of old habits, the robes of nuns. Near the bones was a small silver crucifix and a wooden tablet with faint, almost erased writing in Greek. "Forgive them, Lord. They knew what they did." The story spread across Europe. Priests and poets spoke of the martyrs of the Crescent, women who had chosen faith over fear. Painters captured their final prayers, and cathedrals in distant lands whispered their names in remembrance. But the Ottoman government denied it all, calling it foreign propaganda. Even today, in the small villages of Macedonia and Thrace, elders tell the tale of how the empire tried to break the spirit of the faithful and failed. They say that when the night grows still and the moon hangs low, the wind carries a chorus of women's voices through the ruins, singing hymns in a language older than memory. And those who have heard it say, it is not a song of sorrow, but of victory. For in the silence where the empire's power once stood, only their prayers remain. In the late 19th century, when the Ottomans were losing territory to the rising powers of Europe, foreign scholars and explorers began documenting the empire's forgotten corners. Among them was an English historian named Arthur Pembroke, who had heard the legends of the Hill of Silent Prayers. Intrigued, he traveled through the Balkans to uncover the truth behind the whispers that had haunted the region for centuries. Pembroke reached the ruins in the summer of 1883. What he found astonished him. Beneath thick vines and broken stones, the remains of the old monastery still carried traces of frescoes, images of saints half buried in dust, their eyes scraped out as if by force. As he cleared away rubble from the altar, his lantern flickered against something metallic wedged between the stones, a small bronze box, sealed with wax and stamped with a cross. Inside were fragments of parchment, fragile as ash. The writing was faint but legible, a letter written by Sister Theodora, the very nun whose defiance had sparked the soldiers' wrath centuries earlier. It read, "If these words are ever found, know that we did not yield. They can take the walls, the books, and our names, but they cannot touch the light we kept inside. It will live in the hearts of those yet unborn." Pembroke wept as he read. The discovery confirmed what local villagers had long claimed, that the nuns had not vanished in silence. They had left behind a testament of faith carved into time itself. But when Pembroke returned to Istanbul to publish his findings, the Ottoman officials seized his notes, claiming he had violated excavation laws. He was expelled from the empire within days. His bronze box disappeared, never to be seen again. Years later, after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, copies of Pembroke's notes resurfaced in a monastery archive in Italy. Scholars who examined them said they contained not only Theodora's letter, but also a second document, a confession written by an Ottoman officer who had been ordered to carry out the purge. He wrote of his guilt, describing how, on the night of the attack, the chapel had filled with strange, blinding light just before the torches reached it. It was as if heaven itself had descended. The officer wrote, "I saw no fear in their eyes, only peace. I dropped my sword and fled." Some historians called it myth. Others said it was divine intervention. Yet no one could explain how, in the charred remains of the chapel, certain wooden crosses had survived completely untouched by fire. Today, pilgrims still climb the hill with candles in hand. They say when the wind rises, it sounds like voices praying in unison, the same hymn Sister Theodora once sang before her final breath. And as the last rays of the sun fall over the ruins, the air seems to shimmer with something unseen, a quiet reminder that empires crumble, power fades, but faith endures forever. Decades passed, and the world moved on. Wars began and ended. Empires rose and fell. Yet the Hill of Silent Prayers refused to be forgotten. By the early 20th century, after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, the land came under new rule. The modern age arrived with roads, electricity, and scholars eager to uncover truths buried beneath centuries of dust. In 1927, a team of archaeologists from Athens arrived to conduct the first official excavation. Among them was a young historian named Eleni Markos, who had grown up hearing the legend of the vanished nuns from her grandmother. To her, this wasn't just an archaeological mission. It was personal. On the third day of digging, the team uncovered the remnants of a stone staircase leading deep underground. The air that rose from below was cold and dry, untouched for centuries. Eleni descended with a lantern, her footsteps echoing softly against the stone. At the bottom, she found a small chamber, perfectly preserved. On one wall, faint carvings depicted women standing together, hands raised in prayer. Beneath them, a single phrase was etched in Latin, Lux Dei vincit omnia, the light of God conquers all. In the corner of the chamber lay a wooden chest wrapped in linen. Inside were rosaries, fragments of embroidered cloth, and a collection of burned manuscripts that still carried the scent of incense. Eleni carefully lifted one page that had survived the fire, a hymn written in Greek. The final line read, "Our bodies will fall, but our faith will stand when empires turn to dust." News of the discovery spread quickly across Europe. Newspapers called it the miracle of the lost convent. Pilgrims once again began to visit the site, bringing flowers, candles, and handwritten prayers. Some claimed that on certain nights, the chapel ruins glowed faintly, just as ancient witnesses had described. Scientists said it was caused by a rare mineral in the stone reacting to moisture, but the villagers knew better. As the decades rolled on, wars swept through the region again. The Second World War left much of the land scarred and broken, but the Hill of Silent Prayers remained untouched. Soldiers from both sides reported feeling an unnatural calm when passing near it, as though something unseen forbade destruction. After the war, Eleni, now an old woman, returned to the hill one last time. She lit a candle and placed it on the altar stone, whispering the same words carved centuries before, Lux Dei vincit omnia. A soft wind blew through the ruins, and for a brief moment, she swore she heard voices, hundreds of them, singing in harmony. When she died a year later, her journal was found beside her bed. The final entry read, "They never left. The sisters are still here. Their song guards this place." And so, to this day, travelers who visit the hill at dusk say they feel a chill in the air, as though unseen eyes are watching, not in anger but in peace. A light flickers between the stones, and the faint sound of a bell echoes through the valley. No empire remains to silence them now, only the eternal hymn of those who refuse to bow, the forgotten nuns whose faith outlasted the might of kings. Time continued its relentless march, and the story of the Hill of Silent Prayers became legend, whispered in villages across Greece, Macedonia, and Thrace. Scholars, pilgrims, and curious travelers alike came to see the ruins, drawn by the promise of mystery and the haunting tales of vanished nuns whose courage defied an empire. In the 21st century, a team of documentary filmmakers arrived, hoping to capture the legend for a global audience. Among them was Sofia Calderas, a historian turned storyteller. She interviewed villagers who recounted sightings of ghostly figures and the soft murmur of prayers on windless nights. Some insisted they had seen shadows of women in old habits walking among the stones, vanishing when approached. Sophia descended into the underground chamber, discovered decades earlier. She ran her fingers over the carved words, Lux Dei vincit omnia. The air was cool and still, yet it seemed alive, vibrating with centuries of devotion. Cameras and microphones could not capture the faint whispering she sensed, but she felt it as surely as one feels a heartbeat. While reviewing her footage, she noticed something remarkable. In frames where the ruins appeared empty, faint figures seemed to shimmer, their outlines almost translucent, moving with the rhythm of an unseen hymn. Even the skeptics on the crew fell silent when the audio picked up faint chanting, though no one was speaking. Sophia realized that the story of Sister Theodora and her fellow nuns was not merely history. It was a living memory, preserved not in books or archives alone, but in the very stones, air, and wind of the hill. Their faith had become something eternal, a presence that neither time nor empire could erase. Tourists and pilgrims continue to visit, lighting candles at dusk, leaving small tokens and whispering prayers of their own. And sometimes, just as the sun sets, a gentle, almost musical hum rises from the ruins, carrying the voices of women who had long ago refused to surrender. The world may change, rulers may come and go, and empires may rise and crumble, but the Hill of Silent Prayer stands as a testament. Courage, faith, and devotion can outlast even the most ruthless power. And as the wind carries those ancient hymns across the valley, one truth remains clear. The nuns' voices, once silenced by force, will never be forgotten. The story ends here, not in death, not in despair, but in enduring light. The legacy of Sister Theodora and her sisters lives on, eternal, unbroken, and untouchable by time. Even as the modern world encroached, with roads, electricity, and tourism reaching even the most remote corners of the Balkans, the Hill of Silent Prayers retained its sacred, eerie presence. Locals insisted that the spirits of the nuns remained guardians of the site, unseen yet palpably present. Travelers reported cameras malfunctioning, compasses spinning wildly, and electronic devices turning off inexplicably, as if the hill itself rejected intrusion. In 2023, a team of paranormal researchers arrived, drawn not by history alone, but by the persistent reports of unexplainable phenomena. They set up night vision cameras, thermal sensors, and audio recorders determined to capture proof of the supernatural. As night fell, the ruins were bathed in moonlight, the shadows of the broken chapel stretching long and skeletal across the stones. Hours passed in silence until faint chanting began to echo through the valley. The team recorded indistinct melodic voices, soft, reverent, and utterly unearthly. Some cameras caught fleeting silhouettes of figures moving gracefully among the ruins, wearing habits that shimmered as if made of light. The lead researcher whispered, This is impossible. There's no one here." The local villagers smiled knowingly. "They're always here," one elder said. "They guard what no empire could take. Their faith, their prayers, their souls." By dawn, the phenomena ceased. The recordings captured nothing that could be explained by natural causes. Experts who reviewed the footage were divided. Skeptics claimed clever tricks of light and sound, while believers argued that centuries of devotion had woven a presence into the very stones, a force that could not be destroyed. Even now, travelers visiting the hill often report the same sensations: a sudden chill, a feeling of being watched, and a distant murmur of a hymn carried by the wind. Candles flicker without reason, and shadows appear where no one stands. The ruins have become a pilgrimage not only for the faithful, but also for those seeking to glimpse something beyond the ordinary. Proof that courage, faith, and devotion can endure beyond death, beyond time, beyond empire. The Nuns' story, once almost erased by conquest, now lives stronger than ever. From whispered prayers in hidden chambers to the subtle glow of ruins at night, their legacy refuses to fade. And in every corner of the hill, in every echo and shadow, it is clear: the faith of those women remains untouchable, eternal, and far more powerful than any human hand could ever hope to destroy. As years turned into decades, the legend of the Hill of Silent Prayers began to transcend borders. Writers, historians, and filmmakers around the world referenced the Nun story, fascinated not only by the horror they endured, but by the unyielding power of their faith. In universities, papers explored the psychological and spiritual resilience displayed by the women. In film festivals, short documentaries capture the eerie beauty of the ruins, accompanied by the haunting melodies locals claimed still drifted through the air. In 2030, a digital historian named Leona Demetrius decided to map every trace of convent and its surrounding lands using drones and 3D scanning. As her team hovered above the hill, sensors picked up anomalies, subtle energy readings concentrated near the chapel ruins. On playback, the aerial footage revealed ghostly shapes forming arches over the remaining stones, almost as if invisible nuns were completing their ancient rituals in the moonlight. Leona's research gained international attention. She published her findings in journals and online platforms, but she emphasized one thing: science could document phenomena, but it could never explain the courage, devotion, and unbreakable spirit that had created it. The Nuns' legacy, she wrote, had transcended the limits of the physical world, becoming a living echo of faith itself. Pilgrims still arrive at the hill, candlelight flickering against the stones. Travelers report glimpses of shadows, the faint smell of incense, and soft chanting in the wind. Experiences so vivid that skeptics sometimes find themselves believing. Even photographers who try to capture the ruins report strange effects on film and digital sensors, as though the place itself refuses to be fully contained by technology. And so, the Hill of Silent Prayers remains. It is more than a ruin. It is a testament, a shrine, and a monument to courage under tyranny. Empires may rise and fall. History may be rewritten. But the voices of the nuns, their prayers, their songs, and their unwavering faith, continue to ripple across centuries, whispering a message stronger than any conqueror. Faith cannot be destroyed. It endures, eternal and untouchable. The story that began in fear and oppression ends not in despair, but in triumph. A silent victory carried on the wind, remembered in stone, and alive in every heart that dares to hear it. Generations came and went, yet the Hill of Silent Prayers never lost its power to inspire. Even as modern cities expanded and technology reached every corner of the world, travelers who visited the site reported a timeless quality, a presence that seemed untouched by clocks, calendars, or civilization itself. In 2040, a team of international historians and spiritual researchers conducted the most thorough study ever attempted. They combined archaeology, ground-penetrating radar, thermal imaging, and old manuscripts. What they discovered amazed even the most skeptical minds. Beneath the ruins lay an intricate network of chambers, some previously unknown, containing remnants of centuries-old prayer rituals, inscriptions, and delicate relics that had survived fires, earthquakes, and human hands. The inscriptions told stories of nuns like Sister Theodora, who had refused to bow to invaders, and of others whose names had been erased from official history, but whose devotion had left indelible marks in hidden corners of the monastery. Every symbol, every carved word, seemed imbued with purpose, as if each act of faith had contributed to a legacy no empire could erase. As night fell over the hill, the researchers reported something extraordinary. Faint, harmonious voices, not captured by microphones, but felt in the chest and heart. Some claimed to see flickering figures in habits gliding across the ruins, performing gestures of prayer, their presence unmistakable yet impossible to photograph. Villagers and pilgrims alike confirmed these experiences. Candles lit without wind, shadows moving contrary to natural light, and the soft echo of a hymn that no one was singing, phenomena that suggested the nuns' spirits were more than memories. They were guardians, eternal and vigilant. The legend spread worldwide. Documentaries, books, and virtual reality experiences recreated the ruins and the sacred chambers, yet those who visited in person often reported the same ineffable feeling, a mixture of awe, reverence, and a profound sense that they were in the presence of something eternal. Today, the Hill of Silent Prayer stands as a silent testament. No conqueror, no empire, no force of history can erase the courage of those who refuse to surrender their faith. The whispers of the nuns continue to ride the wind, a hymn that transcends time, a story that refuses to be forgotten, and a reminder that true devotion can outlast even the greatest darkness. The world may change, rulers may rise and fall, but the voices of Sister Theodora and her sisters endure, eternal, unbroken, and more powerful than ever.